Welcome to today's historical deep dive. In the hushed digital halls of sleepy history, we usually whisper tales of empires sleeping under dust, of long-forgotten kings dreaming in their tombs. But sometimes, history doesn't sleep. Sometimes it wakes up with a jolt, a clap of thunder, and the arrival of a man who seemed to require no rest at all. Today, we pull back the curtain on a figure who embodies the relentless, often brutal pursuit of destiny, Napoleon Bonaparte. If you love immersive, real storytelling about ambition and downfall, hit like and subscribe. It helps us more than you know. Drop a comment with your favorite Napoleon quote or the moment that shocked you most. Let's begin and change the way you think about history. You stand in the cold, marble halls of the Tuileries Palace, November 1799. The air crackles, not just with the chill of the late autumn day, but with conspiracy and the palpable stench of the Directory's decay. France, this nation that had overthrown a monarchy in pursuit of liberty, now lies exhausted by revolution and endless war, writhing under a government as corrupt and perhaps even more incompetent than the regime it had dethroned. Walk the narrow, mud-slicked streets outside, and you hear the whispers of chaos, of bandits, of a nation adrift without rudder or purpose. You feel the palpable desperation for order, a raw, aching hunger for a strong hand to replace the grasping palms of politicians who lined their pockets while the people starved. It's a vacuum, vast and terrifying, sucking the hope from the air. Into this vacuum steps you, General Bonaparte, returned not in the triumphant parade you perhaps envisioned from Egypt, but amidst controversy and hushed accusations of abandoning your army. Yet your name alone carries the weight of Marengo and Arcole, the echo of victories that saved the Republic from its enemies. You are not merely a soldier, one among many. You are a symbol of decisive action in an era defined by paralysis and indecision. The Directory, the very body you are about to overthrow, fears you, sees you as a potential threat to their fragile, ill-gotten power. But the powerful, the men who control the purse strings and yearn for stability to protect their wealth, they crave your authority. They need your military might and your popular appeal to legitimize their own carefully planned power grab. You, Napoleon, see the weariness in the eyes of the common people, the profound longing for stability, for a return to normalcy after a decade of upheaval. And in that weary gaze, you recognize the unique, fleeting moment history has offered, the chance to seize destiny not just for yourself, but seemingly from the hands of feckless men who have proven themselves incapable of governing. This isn't merely a coup d'état, a simple military takeover. It's the culmination of ambition meeting opportunity on a national scale. The insight here is stark, cold, and true as polished marble. Power, like nature, abhors a vacuum, and those bold enough, perhaps even audacious enough, to fill it, especially in times of profound crisis, possess the potential to reshape the world entirely. Your meteoric rise reveals a dangerous truth, that legitimate authority can crumble not just from external assault, but far more insidiously, from internal rot, creating fertile ground for those who combine popular appeal with a ruthless, unyielding will to power. The moral takeaway, etched in the cobblestones of Paris, is that societal exhaustion with incompetence is a dangerous, exploitable vulnerability, easily manipulated by ambitious figures promising salvation. Often, history shows us, at the ultimate cost of liberty itself. Ask yourself, standing there, feeling the desperation of a nation and holding the key to order in your hand, what would you have done? Was this the moment of patriotic duty or pure, naked ambition? You step into the cold, chaotic void left by the revolution's promise and the Directory's failure. France isn't just broken, it's shattered. A machine with gears ground to dust, its treasury a phantom limb, its administration a tangled mess of corruption and inertia. Enemies circle the borders like vultures, sensing decay. Yet you don't see ruin. You see a canvas awaiting the master's brush, a clockwork waiting for its engineer. As First Consul, you become the engine, the frantic, tireless heart pumping life back into the nation's arteries. Your desk groans under the weight of dispatches from every corner of the Republic, maps charting potential battlefields, legal texts awaiting your decree. You work with a ferocious energy that leaves seasoned bureaucrats gasping. Treaties are signed, stabilizing diplomatic relations fractured by war. The currency, a laughingstock, is painstakingly shored up, a miracle of financial will restoring faith in the state's viability. The gargantuan task of drafting the civil code begins. Not just laws, but the very framework of modern French society, a testament to reason and order, replacing revolutionary excess. Every decision, from appointing a regional prefect to dispatching an army corps, funnels through you, impacting millions daily. This period is the crucible where the blueprint for effective, centralized leadership is forged. You slash through the tangled vines of red tape, not with a revolutionary axe, but with the precise scalpel of efficiency. Cronies are swept aside, replaced by administrators chosen not for their connections, but their competence. A sense of national purpose, lost in years of infighting and corruption, is painstakingly restored. It is here, wrestling with balance sheets and bureaucratic inertia, that your organizational brilliance shines brightest, proving that effective governance demands not just vision, but a ruthless, almost surgical efficiency and a willingness to make choices others shrink from. But stability on the home front is fragile, while armies mass abroad. Austria, sensing weakness, threatens France's gains in Italy. The Second Italian Campaign becomes necessary, a gamble that could either solidify your power or shatter your nascent government. You lead the army yourself, a calculated risk demonstrating that the soldier of Lodi and Arcole still commands the battlefield. The crossing of the Alps is an epic undertaking, pushing men and logistics to their breaking point. Then comes Marengo, 1800, a battle teetering on the brink of catastrophic defeat for the French. For hours, the Austrians dominate. Your lines buckle. Retreat seems inevitable. The political cost flashes before your eyes. The consulate collapsing, enemies triumphant, your career extinguished. Yet, through sheer force of will, strategic improvisation, and the timely arrival of Dessec's flanking force, the tide dramatically turns. What was lost is snatched back in a brutal, decisive evening counterattack. Marengo isn't just a military victory. It's a political coronation by combat. It proves, unequivocally, that your military genius translates directly into political security, that the savior on the battlefield is also the necessary leader in Paris. The deeper insight of this era is profound. True leadership often begins not with grand titles or glorious pronouncements, but with the thankless, grinding task of restoring order and functionality from chaos. It's less about inspiring speeches and more about ensuring the mail runs on time. The taxes are collected fairly, and the laws are clear. This visible, tangible delivery of competence, stability, and results builds a foundation of popular support far stronger and more resilient than inherited privilege or revolutionary fervor. This is where your initial power finds its precarious legitimacy, earned through demonstrable capability, through delivering security and prosperity where others delivered only chaos and debt. But legitimacy earned on the battlefield and through administrative reforms is fragile. It demands constant reinforcement, a perpetual demonstration that you are not just necessary, but indispensable. Ask yourself, is this relentless drive for order born of genuine concern for France, or the strategic calculation of a man building an unassailable pedestal for himself? What would you have done, faced with a bankrupt nation and hostile powers, where every signature felt like a gamble on the future? It shows that the transition from commander to statesman requires a different kind of war, one fought with ink and law instead of cannon and steel, yet equally vital for survival. This era is the stark reminder that before the empire, before the crown, there was the administrator buried in paperwork, fighting the mundane battles of governance that often mean more than any grand conquest. As stability takes root across France, a chill descends. The tolerance for the boisterous, often chaotic, debates of the revolutionary years begins to shrink, replaced by the cold logic of absolute control. You, as First Consul, initiate the systematic dismantling of the Republic's fragile, sometimes contradictory institutions. This isn't subtle negotiation. It is a surgical excision of dissent, performed with a chilling precision. The consulate, ostensibly a shared executive, quickly morphs into the singular engine of your will. Power, once dispersed and debated in committees and clubs, is now siphoned and centralized, flowing directly to your desk, your mind. The free press, that vibrant and often venomous voice of the revolution, is muzzled. Newspapers are shut down, their numbers drastically reduced, their editors warned or imprisoned. What remains speaks with a cautious, curated voice, reflecting only the light you choose to shine. Political opposition, the loyalist whispers and the fervent Republican arguments alike, is swept away, silenced through intimidation, exile, or imprisonment. To ensure this new silence holds, a network of spies, vast and intricate, is woven across the nation. Fouché, your Minister of Police, a man whose past is as dark and labyrinthine as the alleys of Paris, becomes the master weaver. Every café conversation, every whispered criticism, every private letter feels potentially overheard. The air grows thick with unspoken caution, a heavy blanket settling over the easy, if volatile, camaraderie of the revolutionary years. Calculated deference replaces passionate argument. People learn to watch their words, to measure their loyalty, not just in public pronouncements, but in their very expressions. The Senate and the Tribunate, remnants of revolutionary idealism designed to provide checks and balances, become mere echo chambers. They are transformed into rubber stamps for your decrees, debating points you allow, approving budgets you dictate. You are not merely administering France. You are mastering it, shaping it with an iron hand hidden within a velvet glove of promises of order and prosperity. Loyalty is demanded and ensured through a calculated blend of generous reward for service and swift, often brutal, punishment for deviation. Think of it as a complex, life-sized game of chess where you control every piece, and any piece not moving exactly as you command is simply removed from the board. This shift illustrates the insidious creep of authoritarianism, the initial, perhaps even sincere justification, the desperate need for national unity, security, and order after years of turmoil, smoothly transitions into the suppression of any voice, however quiet, that questions your authority or challenges your path. You learn, intrinsically and ruthlessly, that controlling information and eliminating opposition are not just useful tactics, they are essential, foundational steps in consolidating absolute power. The surprising insight, the chilling realization that settles upon you is that power, once tasted, breeds a deep-seated paranoia. Dissent is no longer seen as healthy debate or alternative viewpoints, but as an existential threat to the control you have fought so hard to seize. It highlights how easily a leader, even one initially hailed as a liberator or a savior, can use the very real need for security as a pretext, a convenient shield, to systematically erode fundamental freedoms, chip by chip, decree by decree. Consider this transformation. Ask yourself, was this the necessary act of a man saving a nation from self-destruction? Or the calculated move of an ambitious ruler shedding the last vestiges of inconvenient liberty? The moral reflection is stark. The very stability and order the people craved after years of upheaval becomes the cage built around their liberties. Their desire for peace is traded for a silent, compliant existence. It serves as a potent reminder that eternal vigilance is not merely a philosophical concept. It is the heavy, daily price of freedom, a price France, in its exhaustion, seemed willing to forget. Whispers begin, insidious and cold, reaching your ears like a creeping fog. Plots are brewing in the shadows, real and perhaps imagined, a venomous coalition of ghosts you thought you'd banished. Royalists, yearning for a king and a return to privilege, find common ground with the last vestiges of Jacobins, who see your rule as a betrayal of the revolution's ideals. Strange bedfellows indeed, united only by a burning hatred for the order you represent. The very structure you've painstakingly erected from the ashes of chaos, the most tangible threat, solidifies in 1804, the Pichegru-Cadoudal conspiracy. Here are men, exiled royalists, not content with mere political maneuvering. Their aim is audacious, terrifying in its simplicity, kidnapping or assassination. Georges Cadoudal, a formidable Vendéan rebel leader. Pichegru, a turncoat general. The names themselves are like thorns in your side. You see this not merely as a threat to your life, though the instinct for self-preservation is raw and undeniable, but as a direct challenge to the entire edifice of your power. The precarious balance you hold between stability and ambition. It's an attack on the foundations of the consulate, a test of whether your authority can withstand the tremor of violent dissent. Your response is not measured. It is a hammer blow, swift, brutal, and utterly uncompromising. Orders fly, gendarmes move with ruthless efficiency, arrests sweep across the country. The net is cast wide, sometimes ensnaring the guilty, often dragging in the merely suspected or inconvenient. The summary execution of the young Duc d'Enghien, dragged from neutral Baden and shot after a sham trial, is a chilling act that sends shivers, not just down the spines of plotting royalists, but through the courts of Europe and even among your own loyal circle. This act, born of fury and fear, reveals a darker aspect taking root. The paranoia bred by holding such immense power, the constant pressure of 1,000 eyes watching, begins to manifest in overt acts of cruelty that shock and appall. This period lays bare a crucial, terrifying truth about leadership. Even for a mind as sharp and a will as iron as yours, insecurity can fuel brutal overreaction. The existence of these plots, however disjointed or unrealistic their chances of success, confirms your deepest fears that the old enemies are always lurking, always ready to strike. It provides, in your mind, a justification for escalating repression, for preemptive strikes against perceived threats, even those that exist more strongly in the echo chamber of your own anxieties. Ask yourself, was this necessary security or the first descent into tyranny? This is how the pressure of immense power can warp judgment, leading to disproportionate responses that create new enemies even as they silence the old. Fear, whether personal or political, is a corrosive element in leadership, pushing rulers towards actions that ultimately undermine their own legitimacy and chip away at their moral authority. Meanwhile, across the border in neutral Baden, the young Duc d'Enghien, a scion of the deposed Bourbon dynasty, lives in quiet exile. He poses no direct threat, is involved in no active plot against you. Yet his very existence, his lineage, represents a rallying point, a phantom king, a symbol of the old world you have violently dismantled. In your mind, he is not just a man. He is a flag your enemies could wave, a potential seed of counter-revolution. The calculation is swift, cold. Legal norms, international boundaries, trifles. You order his abduction. French dragoons violate Baden's sovereignty, snatching the prince from his home in the dead of night. He is dragged back to France, brought before a secret court-martial at the Château de Vincennes. The trial is a farce, the verdict predetermined. There are no witnesses for the defense, no genuine deliberation. It is not about justice, it is about a message. In the pre-dawn chill, illuminated by flickering lanterns casting long, dancing shadows, the Duc d'Enghien is led into the chateau's moat. A firing squad awaits. The shots ring out, echoing across the stones, extinguishing a life and sending a tremor of horror across every royal court in Europe. Chateaubriand, a voice of the old order, will later write witheringly that this act left a stain of blood upon your reign. This isn't military strategy. This isn't even necessary security. This is something far more chilling, a calculated act of terror, a stark, brutal declaration that the old rules are dead and buried with the prince in the moat. You are establishing a new order, accountable only to itself, willing to commit political murder to consolidate absolute power. This is your Rubicon, crossed not on a battlefield, but in the shadows of a fortress. It shocks even some of your most loyal allies. Fouché, your shrewd minister of police, remarks chillingly, "It was worse than a crime. It was a mistake, not for moral reasons, but for the outrage it provoked." The insight here is profound and terrible. The path to absolute power often demands the shedding of conventional morality, the embracing of brutality as a necessary tool of control. Political expediency hasn't just influenced justice here, it has utterly annihilated it. Ask yourself, what price absolute security? What moral lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed? This chilling moment is a stark reminder that the pursuit of ultimate authority can lead individuals down dark paths, justifying unspeakable acts as merely necessary steps toward a greater goal, forever staining the legacy they seek to build. The air in Paris hums with a different kind of tension now. Not the electric charge of revolution, but the low thrum of anxiety. Enemies, both foreign and domestic, plot in the shadows. The Republic, this fragile creation forged in blood and fire, feels perpetually on the brink. And you, Napoleon, First Consul for life, stand at its apex. Yet your allies, your family, even you, recognize the fundamental vulnerability. What happens if you fall? If an assassin's bullet finds its mark, or illness takes hold, the carefully constructed edifice could crumble in an instant, plunging France back into the very chaos the revolution sought to end. The whispering begins subtly, then grows louder. The question isn't if the system needs stability, but how to guarantee it. The solution, presented almost as a reluctant necessity, is permanence. Not the temporary power of a consul, but the unassailable authority of a hereditary title. The idea of an empire is floated, not as a regression to the monarchy you helped overthrow, but as the ultimate safeguard. It's framed as the solidification of revolutionary gains, protected by a line of succession, rooted in your strength. Petitions appear, seemingly spontaneous, circulating through towns and barracks, clamoring for you to take the throne, to become emperor. It's a masterclass in manufactured consent, guided by unseen hands, yet reflecting a genuine public fear of instability. This moment marks a profound, almost tragic turning point. The revolutionary meritocrat, the man who rose through the ranks by sheer talent and will, contemplates a dynastic ambition. The title of emperor is meticulously reframed, stripped of its Bourbon connotations, and presented as the cornerstone of national security, the guarantor of liberty itself, a breathtaking piece of political jujitsu. You leverage the nation's deepest fear to justify a monumental power grab, cloaking personal ambition in the mantle of public good. The insight here is stark. The burning desire for a lasting legacy, combined with the paranoia of losing control, can drive a leader to dismantle the very systems that enabled their rise. The Republic, built on the principle of citizen leadership, gives way to an empire built on the principle of inherited power. It's the craving for permanence overriding the principles of the movement one once led, revealing ambition's ultimate goal, not just power, but immortality. Ask yourself, is this the necessary evolution of power to ensure stability, or the ultimate betrayal of revolutionary ideals? What would you sacrifice for permanence? The ink dries on the documents. The seals are pressed firm. You have dismantled the Republic from within, stepping from First Consul to something else entirely, an emperor. But naked power, however complete, lacks a certain polish. It needs the veneer of legitimacy. It needs the consent of the governed, or at least the appearance of it. And so you orchestrate a masterstroke of political theater, the national plebiscite. Across France, the men are called to vote. The question is framed not as a choice between republic and empire, but as an affirmation of stability, of progress, of your indispensable leadership. It asks if the French people desire Napoleon Bonaparte to be emperor, a title presented as the natural evolution of their revolutionary aspirations, and the only guarantee against a return to chaos. The machinery whirs into motion. Propaganda fills the air, painting the empire as the glorious dawn, and you, its inevitable, benevolent son. Dissenting voices are muffled. Opponents find themselves conveniently absent or suddenly persuaded. Polling stations are set up, registers compiled. The votes are cast, often under the watchful eyes of your officials, sometimes through acclamation rather than secret ballot. The result is never truly in doubt. The official count declares an overwhelming, almost unanimous yes. Millions upon millions affirm your destiny, rubber-stamping the radical transformation with the weight of popular will. It is a landslide, built on a foundation of genuine hope from many, sophisticated manipulation of information, and the quiet chill of coercion for others. You can now stand before France, before Europe, and declare that your elevation is not the seizure of a crown, but the democratic wish of a nation. It is a profound irony, a revolution's champion using the very tools of popular sovereignty to install an absolute monarchy. Was this cynical brilliance or a tragic perversion of ideals? Here lies a stark, unsettling insight. Consent can be manufactured. Democracy, a system born from the struggle against arbitrary rule, can be weaponized to validate its opposite. The plebiscite provides a thin, almost transparent veil of popular mandate, allowing you to consolidate power under the guise of answering the people's call. It highlights how easily public opinion, especially when control over information is absolute, can be guided, swayed, and ultimately bent to serve a ruler's ambition. This wasn't just a political maneuver. It was a psychological campaign, demonstrating that overwhelming public support, while appearing legitimate, can mask the quiet dismantling of liberty. Ask yourself, when is a landslide victory a true expression of will? And when is it simply the loudest echo in a controlled chamber? This moment is a chilling reminder that the mechanisms of democracy offer no inherent guarantee against tyranny. They are tools that can be used to build freedom or to pave the path to absolute power. December 2nd, 1804. You stand on the frigid grand steps of Notre Dame Cathedral, the ancient stones humming beneath the weight of a transforming Paris. The air is thick, not just with the biting December chill, but with the heady scent of incense and the electric hum of anticipation from thousands gathered. Within, Pope Pius VII has journeyed from Rome, a colossal symbolic concession acknowledging the raw power you wield, yet simultaneously asserting the Church's enduring place in the French soul. This is no mere ceremony. It is theater on a scale unseen since the Bourbons, yet entirely redefined by you. You step into the hallowed, vast space, a man who rode the storm of revolution, now poised to declare yourself heir not to the fleeting republic, but to Charlemagne, the Frankish emperor of legend. Every detail, every gesture is choreographed for maximum impact. It is a deliberate, audacious blend of revolutionary legitimacy, underscored by the recent plebiscite affirming your rule, and the monarchical pomp of a bygone era. You are signaling a new age, placing yourself unequivocally at its absolute Sun-King center. The core of this moment is the paradox. You stand before the head of the oldest institution in Europe, inviting its ancient blessing, yet you will not allow him the traditional right to crown you. When the moment arrives, you take the crown yourself, heavy with diamonds and destiny, and place it upon your own head. Then you turn and crown your empress, Josephine. This is more than symbolism. It is a declaration. Your power, you state, comes not from God via the Pope, but from yourself, validated by the will of the French people. You are bending tradition, history, and even the Church to serve your singular narrative of destiny. This act illuminates a profound truth about the pursuit of ultimate power. It requires not just force or administrative genius, but a mastery of symbols, rituals, and historical narratives. You are repurposing millennia of tradition, imperial titles, religious rites, echoes of great conquerors, to lend an aura of undeniable legitimacy to a fundamentally radical seizure of absolute authority. It's a chess game played on the grandest possible stage, with history itself as the board. Consider the sheer, calculated audacity. You drag the Pope across the Alps to Paris, placing him in a position of symbolic validation, yet refuse him the central ritualistic act that defines traditional divine right. It is a subtle, devastating power play, declaring independence even while seeking blessing. The takeaway is stark. True power brokers don't just command armies or write laws. They understand that controlling the story, mastering the symbols, is the ultimate form of control. This ceremony is your narrative made flesh, etched into the very stones of Notre Dame. Ask yourself, watching this spectacle unfold, knowing the revolutionary blood spilled for liberty, equality, and fraternity, was this coronation the pragmatic cornerstone needed to build a stable, powerful nation? Or was it the fatal, glittering betrayal of the ideals that elevated you? Was this genius manipulation of symbols, or the first step towards a tragic, self-constructed gilded cage? The air in Notre Dame hangs thick with incense and expectation, a hushed reverence palpable among the assembled dignitaries and the watching world. Sunlight, strained through ancient stained glass, falls in ethereal shafts onto the grand stage you have set. Before you stands Pope Pius VII, cloaked in magnificent robes, his expression a complex mix of authority and subtle unease. He raises the heavy, bejeweled crown of emperor high, ready to perform the sacred rite that has sanctioned European monarchs for centuries, the investiture by divine right, mediated through the Church. This is the moment history holds its breath. This is the moment history holds its breath. On entering the procession, the end of 59, of life, and 8, done on the amber lin. Despite demonistry and peace, this moment is providing a new perspective on personal finance. Here are the bowl of its monarchs in investiture. The final Sinai of the ancient portrait, presented by a Pope Pius, is a mere temporary detention of the bountiful emperor and top ancient death. But you are not one for inherited rituals that bind you to ancient powers. In a dramatic, deliberate gesture that will echo through every history book written thereafter, you reach out. Your hand, steady and firm, takes the massive diadem from the Pope's outstretched hands. It's not a snatch, not a grab, but a cool, controlled assumption. The Pope lowers his hands, the intended gesture incomplete. You turn, facing the assembled thousands, the representatives of nations, the very fabric of the old world order. You do not wait for a blessing. You do not seek validation. Slowly, purposefully, you raise the crown yourself. The weight is immense, both physical and symbolic. It's not just gold and jewels. It's the weight of centuries of tradition you are defying, the weight of the republic you swore to serve, the weight of the destiny you believe you are forging. You place the crown, the ultimate symbol of earthly power, upon your own head. No king by divine right, no monarch by birth. You are emperor by the sheer force of your will, your genius, your ambition, and the might of your sword. This single act, unplanned in its precise execution, but utterly in character, is the ultimate declaration. You owe your power to no one but yourself. Then, in a softer, but equally symbolic gesture, you turn to Josephine, kneeling before you. You take the smaller diadem intended for her and place it gently upon her head, crowning her empress. Even in this moment of supreme self-exaltation, there is a nod to the partner who has shared the improbable journey. This is the turning point. The self-coronation in 1804 is far more than mere symbolism. It's a statement of absolute self-reliance and boundless ambition made manifest. It marks the psychological shift from the pragmatic First Consul serving France to the emperor who is France, whose will is law, whose destiny is inextricably intertwined with the nation's. The profound insight here is how the pinnacle of ambition can lead to a dangerous belief in one's own infallibility and independence from all external authority, be it church, nobility, or even moral or spiritual constraints. It shows the corrosive effect of unchecked success on humility and perspective, a kind of self-imposed isolation at the very peak of power. This act screams defiance not just at the old world, but perhaps at any external standard or limit. It plants the seed of the idea that you alone hold the answers. You alone are accountable only to yourself. And the moral reflection is stark. When leaders genuinely believe they are accountable only to themselves, when they confuse independence with isolation, and strength with an untouchable hubris, they invariably set the stage for their own downfall. Ask yourself, was this a stroke of ultimate strategic brilliance, capturing the zeitgeist of a new era, or the precise moment that unchecked ego began to write the final tragic act? What would it feel like, holding that crown, believing you needed no one else to sanction your rise? With the crown heavy upon your head, the empire is not merely declared, it is born, a shimmering, deliberate creation. You don't just inherit a state, you architect a world from scratch, erecting a new imperial court as the sun around which everything must revolve. Marshals, dukes, princes, titles not rooted in ancient lineage, but forged in the crucible of loyalty and war, bestowed upon your most trusted generals and family members. The dusty remnants of revolutionary simplicity are swept away, replaced by calculated magnificence. Palaces like the Tuileries in Fontainebleau are refurnished with opulent grandeur. Elaborate ceremonies become the rhythm of state life, and a distinct, imposing imperial style permeates every facet of Parisian existence, from fashion to architecture. You are building not just a governing structure, but a dynasty, meticulously grafting a new Napoleonic aristocracy onto the fractured bones of the old revolutionary order. The very force that propelled you to power, now deemed insufficient, perhaps even threatening to the hereditary future you envision. The focus shifts perceptibly. Consolidating revolutionary gains and solidifying institutions remain important, but the driving force now is the projection of sheer, unadulterated magnificence and the urgent need to secure your lineage. The Grand Army, once the liberator, transforms into the iron fist of imperial will, marching not just for France, but for the glory and expansion of the Bonaparte domain across Europe. This era vividly demonstrates the intoxicating power of absolute authority and the deep-seated human need to create external symbols, glittering facades, to legitimize internal authority. You surround yourself with this grandeur not purely out of vanity, though that undoubtedly plays a part, but primarily to normalize this unprecedented regime, to wrap it in the traditional raiment of monarchy, and to distance yourself from the volatile revolutionary past that, while enabling your rise, now represents a potential vulnerability to your hereditary aims. It's a profound, almost tragic irony. The man who rose by destroying monarchy now feels compelled to adopt its most ostentatious forms to survive. The deeper insight is that those who attain power through upheaval often feel the need to normalize their ascent by adopting the very trappings and structures of the power they overthrew, inadvertently becoming a distorted reflection of what they replaced. This highlights the persistent human tendency to seek external validation and the appearance of permanence in a chaotic world. Yet, here lies the insidious takeaway. The relentless quest for external splendor, for this glittering facade of power, can become a costly distraction, obscuring or diverting resources from the internal vulnerabilities and challenges that could truly threaten the foundation you are so desperately trying to make look impregnable. Ask yourself, is this calculated statesmanship designed for survival, or is it the beginning of the golden cage, trapping the architect within his own creation? The crown is heavy, not just on your head, but on the soul of Europe. Your coronation in 1804 doesn't just declare an empire, it screams a challenge. The old world of kings and emperors, of inherited divine right, looks at you, the Corsican artilleryman turned self-made sovereign, and sees not just a conqueror, but a walking, breathing, incredibly dangerous precedent. They fear the revolutionary fire hasn't been extinguished, merely redirected, and their fear becomes your fuel. The years that follow 1804 are not years of peace, but of relentless, grinding war. It's as if Europe becomes a grand chessboard, and you are determined to checkmate every reigning monarch. Austerlitz in 1805, a tactical masterpiece, dismantling the Austrian and Russian armies, a sun of victory rising over the frozen lakes. Jena and Auerstedt in 1806, crushing the legendary Prussian military machine in a single brutal day. Friedland in 1807, humbling the Tsar and forcing a treaty that carves up the continent's influence. Wagram in 1809, another immense struggle against Austria, another victory bought with rivers of blood. You stand on these fields, not in the grand uniform of the coronation, but often in your simple gray coat, amidst the smoke, the cries, the broken earth. Your will bends nations to your command. Your armies are an extension of your relentless drive. The military genius that once saved France from invasion is now channeled into defending, and more often, expanding your personal empire. You place your brothers, your sisters, your marshals on the thrones you create. Spain, Naples, Holland, Westphalia. The map of Europe is redrawn in your image, colored with the blood of the Grand Army. Here is the tragic irony. The Grand Army, forged in the heady days of revolutionary liberation, fighting for the rights of man, has become the ultimate tool of dynastic and personal aggrandizement. The initial fight for survival morphs into a self-perpetuating cycle of conflict. You need victories to maintain prestige, prestige to maintain control, and control to feed the insatiable ambition that drove you this far. It reveals a chilling truth about unchecked power. It constantly needs external validation, needing to prove its strength through conquest, forever seeking the next challenge, because standing still feels like falling. Was this still the defense of France, or the aggressive expansion of Napoleon Bonaparte? Ask yourself, when does necessary strength devolve into dangerous hubris, exhausting resources and human lives in the endless pursuit of more? From your gilded palace, unable to strike Britain across the waves after the stinging defeat at Trafalgar, you devise a different kind of siege. You will fight them on the balance sheets, strangle their lifeblood, trade. This is the continental system, a decree of economic warfare cast across a continent you command. You declare Europe a fortress, its ports barred against British ships, its markets sealed off from British goods. Every nation under your sway, from Spain to the Grand Duchy of Warsaw, must sever ties with the island nation that defies you. You sit at the center of this vast, intricate web, pulling strings you believe control the flow of wealth and goods across thousands of miles. You dictate tariffs, forbid imports, and punish breaches. It's an unprecedented attempt to command the very currents of global commerce with the force of pure political will. But the continent groans under the weight of this decree. The quays lie silent in Hamburg, Amsterdam, and Venice. The masts like skeletal fingers against the sky. Warehouses overflow with goods that cannot be exported, while vital imports are denied or driven underground into the shadows of smuggling. Industries that rely on international trade wither. Merchants are ruined, workers laid off. The cost of everyday goods skyrockets. Allies like the Kingdom of Holland, their economy built on trade, are choked. Your own brother, Louis, the King of Holland, pleads with you, warning of bankruptcy and unrest. But you are deaf to these cries, seeing only betrayal when your decrees are not followed to the letter. You believe their suffering is a necessary sacrifice to bring Britain to its knees, failing to grasp that you are starving your own strength, sowing resentment in the very soil from which your empire draws its sustenance. This strategy, born of military frustration, exposes a dangerous truth about absolute power. It breeds an illusion of omnipotence. You begin to believe that because you can command armies, you can also command markets. That because you can conquer territories, you can also conquer economic laws. You underestimate the resilience of free trade, the ingenuity of desperate people, and the fundamental needs of nations. The market, it turns out, obeys no emperor, only supply, demand, and the deep human drive to survive and prosper. The tragic irony is thick. In attempting to cripple your enemy, you inflict grievous wounds upon your own body politic, forcing your allies towards ruin and pushing wavering nations, like Russia, to reconsider the unbearable cost of friendship. Ask yourself, when does confidence become delusion? When does the single-minded pursuit of one goal blind a leader to the catastrophic damage they are inflicting upon their own foundation? This wasn't the thunder of cannons, but the quiet, insidious folly of believing one man's will could reshape the fundamental economic forces of an entire world, proving that hubris extends far beyond the battlefield, poisoning policy and paving the road not to triumph, but widespread discontent and ultimate isolation. The air in the Tuileries is thick with unspoken pressure. You walk the grand halls, the master of Europe, yet a single, fundamental silence echoes, the absence of an heir. Your Josephine, the love of your life, the empress crowned by your own hand, has given you no children. The revolution swept away kings, but it didn't erase the perceived necessity of bloodline continuity for true permanence. Your empire, built on seismic shifts and military might, feels, in your deepest moments of reflection, precariously balanced without a direct successor. The weight becomes unbearable. The legacy you are forging, piece by piece, victory by victory, seems destined to crumble without a biological anchor. It is the cruel paradox of your ascent. Having rejected the old legitimacy of birthright, you now desperately crave it for your own creation. The counselor's whisper, the general's hint, the very stones of your palace seem to demand a future secured by blood. Josephine is loyal, loving, the emotional bedrock of your turbulent life, but politically, dynastically, she is a dead end. You face the most agonizing decision of your life. You look at Josephine, who shared your early struggles, who believed in you when few others did, and you know what you must do. This is not love. It is political calculation dressed in the chilling pragmatism of necessity. You announce the divorce, a surgical strike against your own heart for the sake of the empire's future. The official grounds are her sterility, a cold, public humiliation for the woman who stood by your side. The separation is devastating, a raw wound beneath the glittering facade of your power. You trade a genuine, complex human bond for a perceived dynastic guarantee, a chilling testament to the demands of absolute power. Then comes the search for a suitable womb, a high-stakes negotiation across the crowned heads of Europe. You, the man who overthrew their order, now seek entry into their most exclusive club via marriage. The choice falls upon Marie-Louise, Archduchess of Austria, a daughter of Emperor Francis II, the very man you'd so recently humbled on the battlefield. It is a breathtaking political maneuver, marrying into the ancient Habsburg dynasty, symbolically grafting your revolutionary upstart blood onto the oldest royal tree in Europe. It is a pragmatic alliance, devoid of the passion that marked your first marriage, a union forged in treaties and political expediency rather than affection. Yet, it achieves its purpose. Marie-Louise conceives. The birth of your son, Napoleon Francois Charles Joseph Bonaparte, the King of Rome, in 1811, sends ripples of relief and jubilation across the empire. Cannons roar, bells peal, and the public rejoices at the tangible proof of succession. You hold the boy, the embodiment of your dynastic ambition, the key to the future you so desperately crave. In this moment, the personal cost of reaching this point, the broken heart of Josephine, the coldness of your new marriage, feels momentarily justified by the perceived stability your son represents. You have secured the bloodline, you believe, cementing your legacy for generations. This act reveals the chilling ultimate demand of dynastic ambition, the sacrifice of personal relationships and loyalty at the altar of legacy. You prioritize the biological guarantee of succession over the human bond that helped anchor you, demonstrating a frightening pragmatism that borders on the inhuman. The insight here is stark. The drive for an enduring legacy can dehumanize a leader, reducing individuals, even one's closest companions, to instruments of political necessity. It highlights how the pursuit of dynastic power can demand a ruthlessness that extends even to one's most intimate relationships. Ask yourself, what kind of man divorces the love of his life for political gain? What does it say about the nature of power that it can compel such a sacrifice? The moral reflection is a somber reminder that the higher the climb towards absolute power and historical permanence, the more personal costs are incurred. The emotional wreckage is left in the wake of this grand ambition, a silent counterpoint to the public triumph. You gained an heir, but perhaps you lost a part of your soul in the transaction. You believed the bloodline was the crucial mortar for your empire, but perhaps the human cost you paid weakened its foundations in ways you could not yet foresee. You turn your gaze southward towards the Iberian Peninsula. Spain, a decaying monarchy riddled with internal dissent, presents itself not as an ally, but as an opportunity. A Bourbon throne ripe for the plucking. You believe you can simply replace one dynasty with your own, placing your brother Joseph, previously King of Naples, onto the Spanish throne. It seems a logical step in securing the continent, extending your familial grip. You see only a state, a government to be manipulated, an army to be brushed aside. You fail to see a nation, a people. The initial military campaigns proceed much as expected. The Spanish regular army, poorly led and equipped, is defeated in conventional battles. Madrid falls. Joseph is installed as king. The official maps of Europe reflect your latest success. But history rarely follows only the lines drawn on maps. The moment your foreign troops occupy their cities, the moment a foreigner sits on their ancient throne, something primal awakens in the Spanish people. It is not the army you must fight now, but every man, woman, and child. They do not recognize Joseph's crown. They see only occupation. A brutal, relentless war of national resistance ignites. This is not warfare as you know it. There are no grand battles here, no sweeping maneuvers across open plains where your genius can shine. Instead, the conflict dissolves into a million localized struggles, 1,000 brutal ambushes. This is guerrilla warfare, the little war. Farmers become snipers, priests become spies, villages become fortresses. The Spanish people, though their army is defeated, refuse to submit. They fight with a ferocity born of faith, tradition, and an unyielding sense of homeland. You pour hundreds of thousands of your best troops into this quagmire. The Grande Armée, honed on the battlefields of Europe, finds itself bled white by unseen enemies. Supply lines are constantly harassed. Isolated garrisons are massacred. Messengers are intercepted. The land itself seems to conspire against you. Rugged mountains and scorched plains offering perfect cover for ambush. Every inch gained is paid for in blood and treasure. This isn't conquest, it's an endless, agonizing drain. The Spanish ulcer, as the conflict comes to be known, festers. It is a wound that refuses to heal, constantly bleeding your resources. It saps your strength, ties down veterans desperately needed elsewhere, and poisons morale. More dangerously, it provides a potent symbol to other nations. If the mighty emperor can be resisted, if a supposedly conquered people can fight back and survive, then perhaps they can too. Resistance flickers to life across Europe, fanned by the flames burning in Spain. You cannot simply defeat an army. You must conquer a nation's will, and you fail. You treated Spain like another state to be manipulated or conquered, failing utterly to understand the power of a people fighting for their homeland, their faith, their identity. This costly mistake demonstrates perhaps more starkly than any battlefield defeat the limits of military force against the intangible power of national spirit and popular resistance. Here is the deeper insight, the tragic irony. The man who rose from the chaos of a revolution driven by popular will could not comprehend the same force when it stood against him. Absolute power struggles to comprehend intangible forces like national identity or religious conviction, believing that brute force can overcome any obstacle, that bayonets can enforce loyalty. It shows how underestimating the resolve of the oppressed, dismissing their motives as mere banditry or ignorance, can lead to prolonged, unwinnable conflicts. Ask yourself, how can a leader, so brilliant at calculating troop movements and political alliances, be so blind to the human heart? What would you have done, standing in his boots, when faced with a people who simply refuse to be conquered, not by an army, but by your decree? The takeaway is a powerful lesson in the limits of power. Even the most formidable military machine can be bled white by a determined populace fighting for their freedom, proving that will, not just might, can resist tyranny. You learn too late that there are some things that cannot be taken by force, some spirits that cannot be broken by occupation. Spain becomes your first major stumble, a self-inflicted wound that will never truly close. The vast plains of Eastern Europe stretch before you, an endless, indifferent sea of green turning gold under the summer sun. The continental system, your grand economic weapon against Britain, is crumbling, breached by the defiant Tsar Alexander I. You see this not just as a political problem, but a personal affront, a challenge to your authority that echoes across the continent you command. Your ambition, ever restless, now fixes on Russia, vast and formidable, yet seemingly ripe for the taming by the force of your will and the strength of the Grand Army. You decide on the most audacious gamble of your career, a move that makes even your most seasoned marshals pale. Invade Russia in 1812. 500,000 men gather under your banner. French veterans, German contingents, Italian recruits, Polish lancers, a kaleidoscope of Europe bound together by your command. The largest army the world has ever seen. As you cross the Niemen River, a colossal wave washing east, you are confident. How could this force, guided by your genius, fail? You envision a swift campaign, a decisive battle near the frontier, a triumphant march to St. Petersburg or Moscow, forcing the stubborn Tsar to kneel, to rejoin the blockade, to acknowledge your absolute supremacy over Europe. But Russia is not Italy or Austria. It is boundless, empty, and it swallows armies whole. The enemy retreats, refuses battle, burning villages and crops, leaving nothing but scorched earth behind. You push deeper, always deeper, lured by the mirage of a decisive engagement, the final stroke that will end the war. The Grand Army marches, suffers, shrinks from desertion, disease, and the sheer, soul-crushing scale of the landscape. Supplies dwindle, communication lines stretch taut, threatening to snap. Yet you press on, convinced that your destination, Moscow, holds the key, the capital city whose capture will surely break the Tsar's resolve. You finally reach the ancient city, battered but triumphant. But Moscow is not a prize. It is a trap. As you enter, fires begin to erupt, set by its own retreating inhabitants. You find not a delegation offering surrender, but only ashes, emptiness, and the eerie silence of abandonment. You pace the deserted halls of the Kremlin, waiting for a peace treaty that never comes. The Tsar remains silent, distant, refusing to acknowledge your presence in his burning capital. You sit amidst the ruins of your objective, the conqueror of Europe finding only hollow victory. Then the true enemy arrives, not Cossacks or retreating regiments, but the Russian winter, an icy fist descending from the north. You are caught, exposed, deep in hostile territory with dwindling supplies, a restless, shrinking army, and no means to sustain a long occupation. The decision to retreat is forced upon you, a bitter pill swallowed in the face of an adversary you cannot defeat. Geography, climate, and the implacable stubbornness of a nation unwilling to submit. This catastrophic campaign, the March into the Abyss, stands as the ultimate expression of overconfidence fueled by absolute power. You believed your will could conquer not just armies, but geography, climate, and the spirit of an entire empire. The insight here is chilling. Boundless ambition, unchecked by realistic assessment or the counsel of others, leads inevitably to catastrophic miscalculation. Years of unquestioned success had created a distorted reality for you, making you deaf to warnings of Russia's scale and the dangers of its winter, blind to the insurmountable obstacles you were marching towards. The moral reflection is a stark and tragic lesson. The greatest threat to immense power is often self-inflicted, born from the sheer, blinding hubris that believes one's will is destiny and immune to the harsh, undeniable realities of the world. What would you have done, standing in those burning streets, realizing the vast emptiness around you held no victory? The retreat from Moscow wasn't just a military defeat. It was an apocalyptic disintegration. You watch as the Grande Armée, the instrument of your will, melts away not in battle, but against the implacable enemy of winter. Frostbite gnaws at extremities, starvation hollows bellies, and the relentless sting of Cossack raids turns a retreat into a nightmarish rout. Tens of thousands die, then hundreds of thousands. The remnants that straggle back to Europe are ghosts, broken, frozen, starving specters. This wasn't just a loss of soldiers. It was the annihilation of an identity, the burning away of your carefully constructed aura of invincibility. The shockwave hits Europe like a physical blow. Nations you had humbled, kings you had installed, now sense the unthinkable: weakness. The man who seemed immune to defeat has bled profusely in the snows of Russia. The perfectly balanced edifice of your continental system begins to sway. First Prussia, then other German states, sensing the moment, rise in revolt. They are no longer cowed, they are emboldened. The coalitions that had dissolved under your strategic genius now reform, larger, more determined, sensing the tide has turned. The game board has flipped, and suddenly you are playing defense against nearly the entire continent. You, Napoleon, the architect of victory, become the master of brilliant, desperate defensive campaigns in 1813. You scrape together new armies, young, inexperienced conscripts, the last blood of France, and manage tactical victories against overwhelming odds at Lutzen and Bautzen. It's a testament to your enduring tactical genius, a furious, brilliant rearguard action against the inevitable. But the sheer, grinding weight of numbers is against you. France is exhausted, its resources depleted after years of war and blockade. The resentment against your imperial rule simmers beneath the surface, ready to boil over. You realize, perhaps too late, that you built your empire on victory and fear, and when victory falters, fear curdles into abandonment. The moment of undeniable reckoning arrives in October 1813 at Leipzig, the Battle of Nations. It's the largest battle fought in Europe before World War I, a colossal clash of 500,000 men. You fight with your customary brilliance, but the combined might of Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Sweden is simply too much. You are defeated decisively. The floodgates burst, and you are forced back across the Rhine, back onto French soil for the first time in years. The Allies pursue relentlessly. The war is now at the gates of your capital, a stark, brutal reality. The final act is swift and agonizing. The Allies enter Paris in March 1814. The political will to resist among the French elite, long eroded, collapses entirely. And then comes the deepest cut. Your marshals, the men who owed you everything, the pillars of your military machine, facing undeniable defeat and the prospect of continued bloodshed, refuse to fight further. They demand you abdicate. The loyalty you commanded, built on shared glory and fear, evaporates when faced with utter collapse. Faced with overwhelming force outside and betrayal within, cornered in Fontainebleau, you sign the instrument of abdication in April 1814. This rapid collapse from continental master to exiled monarch in just 2 years is a chilling demonstration of how quickly an empire built solely on the personal will and military dominance of one man can unravel once that core strength is gone. The system was you. When you faltered, the system had no independent foundation to stand upon. It shows, with tragic clarity, that power derived from fear and success is inherently fragile. Remove the success, and fear doesn't maintain order. It fuels abandonment and revolt. Ask yourself, was his system ultimately doomed by its single point of failure, Napoleon himself? The retreat from Moscow wasn't just a logistical disaster. It was the moment the world saw the man behind the myth bleed, and the empire, built on that very myth, began its inevitable crumble. It's a profound warning against building structures of power entirely dependent on the capacity and luck of one fallible individual, no matter how extraordinary. You sit on the windswept, desolate island of St. Helena, a speck in the vast, indifferent ocean. The world you bent to your will is now impossibly far away, a stage where others now play out their dramas. 6 years you will spend here, a prisoner, not just of the British, but of your own history, the echoes of your ambition rattling in the confined space. You pace the floorboards of Longwood House, a monotonous rhythm against the relentless wind, dictating your memoirs to loyal companions. This isn't just recounting the past. It's a final, desperate campaign to reshape your narrative, to sculpt a legend from the ruins of an empire. You argue with your jailers over trivialities, small battles fought because the grand war is lost. Here, stripped of the imperial trappings, the titles, the armies, you are, perhaps for the first time in decades, just a man. You grapple with the crushing weight of consequences, the inescapable gravity of actions born from boundless ambition. The grand design, the Napoleonic dynasty meant to stretch across generations, has failed. The map you redrew with armies has been largely erased by treaties and restoration. Yet, in this isolation, a new kind of creation begins. You start crafting the legend of the revolutionary champion, betrayed by the old monarchies, a modern Prometheus bound to a rock for bringing fire and reform to the people. It is a compelling narrative, even if it conveniently glosses over the imperial crown and the endless wars. Here, away from the intoxicating rush of power, some final, brutal lessons emerge. You contemplate the capricious nature of destiny, the cruel role of chance, the illness at Borodino, the late arrival of Grouchy at Waterloo, the fickle loyalty of men, and the enduring, almost invincible power of ideas, revolutionary ideas that you first championed, then tried to contain. Perhaps, in moments of stark, painful honesty, you see where ambition, once the engine of genius, curdled into a blinding force. You see where strength hardened into unyielding rigidity, and where the relentless pursuit of control led only to profound isolation at the very top. Your life, in this final act, becomes a case study in the human condition itself. The relentless drive to achieve, the intoxicating, corrupting effect of absolute power, the constant struggle for control against a chaotic world, and the inevitable, humbling confrontation with forces larger than any single will, no matter how extraordinary. Ask yourself, was this self-realization, or simply the final, most sophisticated form of self-deception? What remains on St. Helena is not the emperor, but the story, the legend you shape even in defeat, a testament to the enduring human fascination with greatness and its staggering cost. This final, lonely exile poses the ultimate question your life embodies. What does it truly mean to succeed utterly, to grasp the world in your hand, only to lose absolutely everything? Your legacy is not just the code or the battles etched into history books, but the eternal, whispered cautionary tale of unchecked ambition's trajectory. Your story screams a warning across the centuries. What happens when history offers similar vacuums, similar crises? What if leaders, driven by insecurity and the promise of order, once again seek to consolidate power through manipulated consent, silencing dissent, and pursuing grand, unsustainable ventures? Your story, etched in blood and glory, whispers, imagination governs the world. But your exile on this lonely rock adds grimly and finally, and reality always collects the final debt.